For years, we were told that the running back position is the key to winning fantasy championships. And as staunch running backs are evil and fragile truthers, we are here to tell you that they definitely still are, but only if you hit on them. Only if you identify those legendary RB1 seasons overall, if you get those top 5 seasons with your early round running back picks. Today, we are going to break down the double hero or superhero running back draft strategy, do's, don'ts, theories, principles, closing it out with dueling mock drafts. Me and Danny are both going to execute a double hero or a superhero running back strategy and talk about the strategy throughout the draft. So if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy all our strategy content, leave a like, subscribe, check out all of our other videos as well as Zero RB, Hero RB. Before we get into the video, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, like you kind of alluded to, we are known as the biggest running back haters. We love our wide receivers. We love our elite quarterbacks. We love our elite tight ends. And if you've been listening to us over in the Dynasty streets for FSC for a while, you'll know that we value the running back position as much as NFL teams do. But like Corey said, if you hit on the right running back, you could potentially win your fantasy championship. And in today's video, we will show you on how to.
Let's get right into it.
All right, so the structure of today's video, we will be going through these points in depth, defining the double hero running back strategy and why it can be effective, the running back dead zone and why you definitely want to avoid it with this strategy, what kinds of running backs we want as our anchors for our fantasy football teams, how scoring formats could potentially affect double hero running back strategies effectiveness, and finally, we're going to be demonstrating you how to do it effectively when we hop into a mock draft.
Yeah, so let's start with the definition right off the top. Double hero RB, you get 2 anchors, right? Hero RB, you had 1 anchor. Zero RB, you have no anchors. Double hero RB, you're going to draft 2 anchor running backs, ideally in the first 3 rounds, because that's where those legendary seasons come from. That's where we get those top 5 seasons most often. We've become very sharp at identifying which running backs are going to hit big. It seems simple and straightforward, right? Just draft 2 good running backs early because wide receivers a deep position, quarterbacks deep, tight ends deep. But sometimes, despite drafting those 2 anchors, people often will mess up this strategy by either drafting low ceiling running backs that don't have the legendary upside or don't have that top 5 upside. Or after they draft those 2 guys, they're not going to continue to hammer running backs in the middle of the dead zone when they've already drafted 2 anchors early. So a proper double hero RB is when you got 2 through round 7 and 8. You don't want to draft more than those 2 anchors that you get in the early rounds. You want to bypass the running back dead zone. You want to draft your wide receivers, draft your quarterbacks, draft your tight ends. In the Zero RB and the Hero RB videos, we talked about making sure that you win those other positions by fading running back. In this video, you're taking shots on those elite seasons with a double hero RB. You're leaning into that variance. You're leaning into the injury risk with the upside that if they both hit like it did for Pat Kerrane, which you guys can see on the screen right now, he won Best Ball Mania 3 with a double hero running back strategy. But you also still need to fill out the rest of your roster. You still need to be there at wide receiver. You still need to be there at quarterback. This in turn causes you to be behind the 8 ball because you go ahead and invest in the running back position, but you're going to catch up in those mid rounds. So we're going to talk about how to do this strategy effectively. We don't want to be your buffoon league mate that inevitably drafts a bunch of dead zone running backs after they already draft Austin Eckler and Jonathan Taylor through the first 2 rounds. We want to soak up that value at wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end to build out a more balanced team. So the Zero RB and Hero RB running back strategies, all these strategies can be used in a vacuum. They can all be effective in any given scenario. Everything that we discussed in the Zero and Hero RB videos kind of still apply here, but running backs are going to get injured a lot. They are a high variance position. We are leaning into this by drafting the guys that on average miss 3 games a season versus 1.84 games a season for wide receivers. But using this strategy, you at least get access to that elite upside that we're looking for at the running back position.
Yeah, 100% agree here. While your league mates are drafting in the dead zone, hoping to find, the next Josh Jacobs, there's going to be 5 Mike Davises in that range as well. So being understanding of what exactly the dead zone represents, understanding, again, this is not a make-all, end-all strategy. There will be a Josh Jacobs that could emerge any given year, but understanding the odds at hand here, you're much more likely to hit at your quarterback, your tight end, your wide receiver positions in this range. Yeah, you'll have some years where, again, a Josh Jacobs guy will emerge, but if that player turns into a guy like Mike Davis and you passed on him or you took him over a guy like George Kittle, or maybe last year you passed on Jalen Hurts because you were taking a dead zone running back, it's going to be more detrimental for you in the long term.
Yeah, exactly. And with this running back dead zone area, we all talked about it in the previous videos, Zero RB and Hero RB. It made less sense to avoid it in those videos because you didn't have a lot of running backs on your roster. This time, you especially want to avoid the RB dead zone because you have already made the inherent bet with the 2 picks that you made. Let's say you take Jonathan Taylor and Austin Eckler for through the first 2 rounds, that those guys are going to anchor your team. They're going to anchor your running back position. In the dead zone, running backs miss at a substantial rate. They miss 2 out of 3 times basically since 2015. And the last 2 years, it's been even worse. You can see 18% in 2021, 25% in 2022 due to the sharpness of sites like Underdog Fantasy, raising awareness on the concept and refining ADP in these sharper tournaments. The last 2 years, you've gotten 5 hits out of 23 dead zone running backs. That's a 21% hit rate dead zone running backs have hit. Even though we got Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders and these guys that were half decent, like you said, there was 5 more Mike Davises. There was 5 more guys that were not hits. And while the wide receivers in this area of the draft, 20 of them hit out of 48, which is a 41% hit rate. And like I said, this is despite Josh Jacobs and Miles Sanders being hits. So there's going to be hits, but you're also going to miss most of the time. So you're better off if you deploy this double hero RB strategy, get your guys early, avoid the dead zone, catch up at those other positions.
Again, you want to have conviction in your drafts, absolutely. But when the hit rates are so heavily leaning on the side of wide receiver in this range, why would you stack up on a less likely option? Unless you have a crystal ball that you can find this year's Josh Jacobs, you're better off playing the odds and avoiding this area in drafts for the most part, unless they slide a ton in value. Unless, a guy that you deemed as a dead zone running back, let's just say hypothetically, David Montgomery, someone that maybe goes in the round 5, round 6 area of the majority of your leagues this year, ends up falling round 7, round 8 area. Once you're outside of the dead zone, at that point, you want to take a guy like that, I'm fine with it. But when you're taking that type of profile in round 5, round 6, when we see guys like Christian Watson, Drake London, Mike Williams, all these stud wide receivers, not even talking about the onesies yet, in that range, it makes no sense to invest in the running back position. So for this strategy, we want to take our 2 anchors early, our 2 shots as a legendary upside level season, and bypass the running back dead zone nearly completely. Once you want to, get into the round 8, round 9 area, and you want to take another back at that point, I'm okay with it. But especially between rounds 4 and round 7 specifically, you want to be stocking up at your other positions. Because at the end of the day, in especially any type of PPR format, you need your wide receiver position to be strong. Even if it's a half PPR, you need your wide receiver position to be strong. It's a position that's dominated by target earning alpha wide receivers. Whereas, as we've said in the hero and zero RB videos, running back is more an opportunity based position. So in order to get ahead of the pack here, the running backs at the top of your drafts are your elite guys. You don't want to fall into the trap of a secure workload. You might get, 20 touches per game because we see, 20, 25 plus running backs any given week emerge with that type of workload.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's get into kind of like what types of running backs do we want to be drafting, right? Because we're taking 2 shots. What kind of shots do we want to be taking? In this chart that you guys can see on the screen, I've gone back through 8 years of ADP since 2015, 160 running back sample size, and I've broken down which archetypes of running backs hit big, which ones bust more, which ones get injured more. As you guys can see, the archetypes of running backs on the screen: breakout candidates, trusty veterans, running backs in their prime. Breakout candidates, year 1 to 3 guys. They haven't had an RB1 season yet. We're expecting them to take a big step forward. Those guys have actually returned on ADP at the highest rate of anybody. So if you're worried about, they haven't done it before, Bijan Robinson fits this description, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, those guys would be classified as breakout candidates. Trusty veterans, guys that are 26 years old or in year 6 or later of their career. Obviously, because the 2017 running back class was so good, a lot of these guys are going at the high end of the draft. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, all those guys 26 years old or older are considered trusty veterans. These guys are generally safe projections. They usually don't kill you when they miss, but they don't hit big at as high of a rate as the breakout candidates. And then the running backs in their prime is kind of the best of both worlds. You get a guy that's already had a running back 1 season, but he's still young enough, like a Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, guys like that. So this year, you guys can see it on the screen. It's kind of a heat map. You see the blue running backs as the trusty veterans, the yellow running backs as the breakout candidates, and the green running backs as the running backs in their prime. So I'm not saying like you need to avoid old running backs by any means. It's just if you have a tiebreaker of like a similarly ranked wide receiver or something like that, maybe you want to go with, let's say, a Garrett Wilson over Saquon Barkley, or a Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb over Tony Pollard or something like that.
Yeah, or 100%. Or maybe you're at the back end of the first round, early second round. Same thing with a guy like Nick Chubb. Take the wide receiver in that range that has the opportunity to be a top 3 overall wide receiver over Nick Chubb, who, as much as I like him and he can finish as a top 6 running back, probably doesn't have running back 1 overall upside. And I would say guys like Bijan Robinson, Brees Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, they're your boom bust breakout archetypes that return on ADP at the highest rate in terms of running back profiles. Guys like JT, Ramondre, Jacobs, Najee, they're your good bets for, a solid floor, good ceiling in that range. And then, of course, we'll discuss some tier breaks and micro player takes, such as in the mock. But there are some guys, especially at the top, that given their current opportunity cost, we're simply not touching. So I would say if you're doing a double hero RB, I'm going to get into it in a second, but you have to make sure you're taking the right running back. And let's just get right into it. When should you use a double hero running back strategy? A double hero running back strategy can be a viable strategy in a room where you expect wide receivers to fly off the board. Let's say you're on underdog fantasy. You want to do a best ball draft. And those type of rooms, wide receivers are going to fly off the board. 8, 9 wide receivers at times in the first round. You're looking at wide receiver 17 at times by the mid third round area. Wide receivers are inherently going to go higher in that type of draft room. And in general, the sharper the draft room it is, the more wide receivers that are going to go off the board. So for us, it kind of comes to a point now where it's the inverse of what we talked about in year past. We talked about the 0 RB in year past, and we said, well, listen, why are we taking the running back 9 over the wide receiver 3? This year, it kind of almost feels like it's inverted back to, the 2016 year where Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham were all like the top picks in fantasy, and the running backs were kind of pushed down before that legendary 2017 running back class came into fray. It kind of has similar vibes to that year. We're now faced at decision points we were never really left with, where we're sifting through the high-end running back ones, the RB2, RB3, RB4 overall in ADP versus low-end wide receiver ones in our draft. So at that point, double hero is only viable, in my opinion, when we identify running backs and have RB1 overall upside. But when they're falling down the board like this, they got to hit.
Yeah, exactly. And our buddy Ron Stewart's talked about this because we haven't had a legendary season since 2020 when Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook did it. We're kind of chasing Sasquatch right now. We don't know when the next legendary season is going to come. And since then, we've seen Cooper Kupp absolutely smash. We've seen Justin Jefferson absolutely smash. Tyreek Hill absolutely smash. And it's kind of inverted itself back, like you said, in 2016, that 2015 year, all the running backs got injured. Wide receivers started to go higher in drafts. And we might see a changing of the guard a little bit this year. And like we discussed in the Hero RB video, wide receivers across the board are a better bet, median projection wise, good ceiling bets, less likely to get injured for the most part than running backs. But the area that the running back position trumps wide receiver is their ability to give you those elite win rate seasons like we saw from Christian McCaffrey in 2019, Todd Gurley in 2017, Le'Veon Bell in 2016. We've seen these big time seasons come from running backs typically, and really only Cooper Kupp has kind of been able to match that at the wide receiver position. So when you're drafting a running back, if they have that legendary upside, then you can get an advantage over the wide receiver position. And that's the only real reason you want to take the risk of drafting said running back or said double running back in this video's case early on in your draft, because you are sacrificing that safety, that easy projection, less likely for injury factor that the wide receiver position gives you.
Yeah, 100%. We want to be picky when we're drafting a running back, point blank and simple. In the majority of rooms, I wouldn't recommend a double hero running back because running backs are going to get pushed up the board. A lot of your home leagues, maybe, 5 running backs go in the first round, another 3 to 4 plus go in the second round. You don't really have access to running backs with elite league winner, legendary ceiling, 20+% win rate ceiling. However, if you're in a sharper room where people are more willing to draft wide receivers early, I not only think it can be a viable strategy, but I think it could be an ideal one. It all depends on what type of selection of running backs you have in your second round if you decide to go running back in the first.
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately comes down to best player available, but the reason we're harping so much on this strategy is that some home leagues are going to overcorrect for the lack of running back production if they're sharper. They're going to start drafting wide receivers a little bit higher, and that could result, like Danny said, in you hypothetically taking Bijan Robinson at pick 7, coming back in the second round, Tony Pollard still on the board. That would never happen in any other year. But if you guys play in a little bit sharper of home leagues, then that is possible what you're looking at. I would say the Hero and 0 RB video were more for like casual home league settings. This video might be a little bit more like galaxy brainy if you're in a league that follows content, maybe makes content if it's an industry league, or you're doing underdog drafts like we already talked about as well. So One last thing before we get into the actual mock draft, Danny, I'll let you take it away with kind of how scoring format kind of impacts double hero or RB viability.
And specifically your roster setup is a crucial information point you need before making that decision to go with the double hero RB strategy. If your league devotes, 3 wide receiver spots and 2 flexes in a full PPR league, I think you'd be too far behind the 8 ball to actually fully commit to a double hero RB. However, if it's, again, a more shallow lineup, maybe it's 2 wide receiver spots, 1 flex, 2 wide receiver spots, 2 flexes, or maybe it's a half PPR type of league, I think you're much more likely to build out a successful double hero RB in that type of format because wide receiver depth is obviously less important.
Yeah, in my home league, for example, we've overcorrected to the point that we added a 0.5 for first downs for running backs because we don't want, everybody going wide receiver heavy in the first couple rounds of the draft. So ultimately, the last point before we get into the mock here, the reason we are drafting these running backs early and doing a double hero RB build is because we're trying to take a lottery ticket shot on and multiple lottery ticket shots on a legendary season. The same principles when it comes to drafting mid-round remain. You want to draft wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends in the dead zone. And especially now, because you're going to be behind the 8 ball at that position, if we start with a double hero, the goal is still to have, 6 wide receivers through the first 10 rounds, wide receivers through the flex, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex league. You probably want to have 5 or 6 wide receivers like we talked about. So we're going to stop talking about it. We're going to actually put it into practice. So let's get into the mock that we're going to do here. All right, so we are now into the draft. As we kind of talked about, we think the middle of the round is a good part to do a double hero RB. So Danny's going to be drafting from the 1-7. I'm going to be going from the 1-2, which also in sharper rooms is a decent spot to do this strategy because you're going to get one of those top end wide receivers in the first round. And then at the end of the second and third round, you're going to kind of see the like Ramondre, Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor range. So we're probably going to execute a double hero RB in these kind of pick strategies. When you're towards the back end of the first round, it's a little bit harder, but you can obviously still go with like a Saquon, Tony Pollard or something like that if you wanted to, but we'll kind of see how this draft plays out. Ideally, you don't go into a draft saying I'm absolutely going to deploy double hero RB, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to do that. So Danny, if you want to hit the start draft button, you guys can see the league format as well. It's a 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flex, full PPR, 1 quarterback league. So nothing too crazy here. I'm going to go, like I said, with Jamar Chase with the second pick and see kind of what falls back to me in the second round.
100%. So you go with Jamar Chase, and I'm assuming, again, because we're doing the double hero RB, you're planning on potentially taking 2 running backs at that 2-11, 3-2 for those watching at home. For me, I'm at the 1-7 here, and my highest rated player overall would technically be Stephon Diggs, but my next highest rated player would be Bijan Robinson, a guy I value inside the top 5. So if I'm going to start a double hero RB, I may as well go with the one with, by far, in my opinion, the highest ceiling, given his age, given the touch workload we can expect in that Arthur Smith scheme. I'm really excited for the aspect of Bijan Robinson. So
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing that's interesting about the spot that you're drafting from is, let's say, Pollard doesn't fall to you here. You also could technically execute a double hero RB from the middle of the first round with your third pick as well. Like you could have taken, maybe an elite quarterback, a wide receiver or something. And, come the 3-7, maybe go after a Travis Etienne or a Jahmyr Gibbs or something like that. So I'll let you make your pick here. But that's something that I think is worth noting. If you still want to execute this strategy, but you don't want to do RB with your first 2 picks, I still do like Jahmyr Gibbs, Etienne, maybe even somebody else falls to that point, Ramondre or Jacobs or Taylor, if they're worried about the holdouts. It's definitely possible to still execute it if you don't go running back here.
for sure. And because you're going with running backs at the 2-3, again, typically I would just take Garrett Wilson here, run a hero RB and be fine. But for the purposes of this, let's just assume that Garrett Wilson's off the board, because obviously this would be an auto smash pick for both of us. With that being the case, if Garrett Wilson was off the board, my next highest rated player would be Tony Pollard. So again, I'll just pretend like Garrett Wilson's off the board and I will go with Tony Pollard and just execute a bog standard double hero with the 1 and 2 picks.
Yeah, so I'm back on the board here, and my highest rated running backs, both of them are the next 2 that are on the board here, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson. I also actually have ETN just slightly behind Ramondre Stevenson. So we still have some, news that we need to sort through when it comes to Breece Hall, but I'm starting to think that he's, more healthy than they were leading on initially, because Dalvin Cook does not have a contract with the New York Jets. If they were really worried about Breece Hall's health, I think he would probably have been signed already. So I'm going to go with Breece Hall here, assuming, he's got that legendary upside. We've already documented this in the league, what makes a league winning running back video. I mean, I watched Hard Knocks today. It looks like the team's quite fired up about having Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, as am I, for the sake of Breece Hall. Dude, he was doing this with Zach Wilson and Joe Flacco. Imagine even 90% of what we've seen from Aaron Rodgers the last couple of years throwing the football for that team. He could be a red zone monster. And also, they only have Garrett Wilson to throw to, and Breece Hall had like a massive target share as a rookie. So we got a guy that has legitimate like 100 target upside, which I don't think is talked about enough with Breece Hall. I think people focus on the offense being better, but they don't focus enough on the fact that there's nobody else to throw to outside of Garrett Wilson.
And it should be a very consolidated type of target share between that team. We know Garrett Wilson's going to be the guy there, but like you said, very good opportunity there for Breece Hall to potentially carve out a big workload in the receiving game. This was a guy that last year when he was fully healthy, so actually went through this in the Truth Series, but we know he only played 7 games, but for the purpose of this, in the games he played over 40% of the snaps last year, he was averaging 6 targets per game as a rookie running back, despite, again, I only isolated for 40+% of the snaps. You're mentioning a guy that come year 2, if he's fully healthy, can command upwards of 70, 80% of the snaps, given his 3-down workload, given his 3-down capabilities as a pass catcher, as a rusher. I mean, we could be looking at one of the heaviest targeted running backs in the entire NFL. I fully agree there. My next highest rated wide receiver, however, transitioning back to my pick, would be Calvin Ridley. In this spot, maybe you think about playing the ADP game, but because I don't have to wait, or I have to wait until the 4-6, I don't pick for the next 10 picks. I don't think there's a spot where I can pass on Calvin Ridley. Maybe if it was at like the 310, 311 and you want to play the ADP game there, I'm okay with it. But when you have to wait nearly a full round for your next pick, I say at that point, just go get your guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes you want to play the ADP game, but I'm not usually in the business of doing it if it's like a minimal difference. And I literally have Ridley rated higher than this. So even though you could have played the ADP game potentially, I'm not risking it. He's technically already a value based on my rankings. I also took Ramondre with my last pick too, which I think he has a high target ceiling. We saw him like top 5 in the position at commanding targets. And I think if Mac Jones and Bill O'Brien, figure this offense out, he has a higher touchdown opportunity than he did last year. Plus, there's no Damian Harris there. They don't really have another running back to go along with him.
Yep, no, I agree with you there. My next pick, my next highest rated wide receiver, again, we already mentioned in the principles that if you're going to take your 2 running backs, you have to catch up at the 8 ball at the wide receiver position. So for me personally, my next highest rated wide receiver and a guy I'd feel comfortable taking in the mid-4th would be Jerry Jeudy. So I will select him here at the 406.
Yeah, exactly. So because you have your 2 running backs. You took them in the first 2 rounds. I grabbed mine at the turn there. I do have Jamar Chase, thankfully, to anchor my wide receiver position, which is why I actually really do like going double hero RB when you're picking 1-1 or 1-2, because you could still get yourself a superstar wide receiver and also upside swings to a legendary or an elite running back season. I'm back on the board here. Could make a deviation here. I think this is a pretty decent value for TJ Hawkinson. I'm not going to lie. I actually don't usually see him fall this far. What I think I'm actually going to do, though, because all these wide receivers kind of blend together for me, I'm actually going to take a shot here on Justin Fields, get myself an elite quarterback to go along with Breece Hall, Stevenson, and Jamar Chase there. I'm not super high on Justin Fields, but I am starting to get a sinking feeling that he might make me look stupid this year, take a big step as a passer. And even if he doesn't, man, like the guy is going to run so much that he could be a bad passer like he was last year and still be very good for fantasy. And we're talking about a team that like threw the ball like 20 times a game, like career NFL history level low pass attempts. And they added DJ Moore to this team. So Justin Fields, I'm starting to stop being such a hater. And I'm going to probably take a little bit more shots on him in the late 4th, early 5th area, because he has the ability to achieve basically what Jalen Hurts did last year, which is maybe not necessarily the MVP caliber season, but from a fantasy perspective, the rushing kind of can get him into that territory. So I'm going to grab one more guy here. Do I want to? Yeah, let's do it. Let's pair him up with his receiver. Let's grab Justin Fields and DJ Moore here, stack him up.
Yeah, no, I really like what you're able to do there. And another quick note, and something that we forgot to, I guess, allude to when we were talking about the double hero strategy is that in a 0 RB draft or even in a hero, I'm more likely to go quarterback and tight end early. However, if you're in a double hero running back and you need to make up the 8 ball at wide receiver, I think you can only deviate for one of the two. If you want an elite quarterback, you can do that. If you want an elite tight end, you can do that. So like you said there, you're between Fields and Hawkinson. Even if Hawkinson had fell to you at the 5-2, I feel like at your spot, which you did with DJ Moore, you kind of needed to go with a wide receiver here. So that's another, I guess, con about the double hero is that you're kind of pigeonholed and maybe only going at one elite onesie instead of both. Whereas in, of course, the hero and 0 running backs, you want to build up both because you want to be dominant everywhere anywhere except your running back position. So either way, a little tangent. I'm back on the clock here. I could be looking down the barrel of some of these wide receivers. I got like a guy like Mike Williams, Brandon Ayuk, Terry McLaurin, a lot of nice names in this range. Because Mike Williams is a little lower on this list, I may deviate towards the tight end or the quarterback position. And you know what? I have strong, stable options at my running back and wide receivers, in my opinion, right now. Give me some upside at tight end. I'll take George Kittle here, get my elite onesie, and then try to load up at the wide receiver position afterwards and see what falls back. Hopefully, Mike Williams does make it back to me.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought you were going to stack up too and take Trevor Lawrence to go along with your Calvin Ridley. You could have definitely went in that direction. The other thing too, I mean, we're going to get to see a firsthand example of going both elite onesies because Team 3 did it. They took Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, and obviously they just made the big mistake of taking DeAndre Swift instead of catching up at wide receiver. So we're going to see how bad the wide receiver core of Team 3 looks by the end of this draft. We're going to go about 8 rounds, and then we're going to simulate to the end. Not simulate, actually, but like you guys are we're going to skip you to the end just so we can show you kind of the archetypes of players that we're taking at the end of the draft. So I'm back on the board here. Got Jamar Chase, DJ Moore. Definitely still need to catch up at the wide receiver position. Probably going to double tap them here. I'm going to take Christian Kirk, get access to a good offense, a guy that has a high target share, gross, dead zone running backs go at the turn there, so I don't have to worry about that. And then I'm back on the clock here. Could go, with Deontay Johnson type, go with the high target share. I have some investment into a shaky offense with the Chicago Bears. I have 2 players from the Chicago Bears, so I don't really want to invest in a bad offense with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or potentially the Pittsburgh Steelers here with Mike Evans and Deontay Johnson. So what I'm going to do is invest into an offense that I think will be great this year and take Jordan Addison here to go along with my players there, because one thing that I think is very underrated is last year I made the mistake of investing in like DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson in my own home league. And I really, really did not like watching the Carolina Panthers offense and the Pittsburgh Steelers offense week in and week out. And I think it really does hinder your team's overall upside, because as much as high target share wide receivers are good investments, you don't want to have all high target share wide receivers on bad teams. It's okay to have, maybe a Christian Kirk type who's not the number 1, but he's still going to be very good and give you those spike week potential because he plays for a good team, as opposed to like littering your entire roster with a bunch of Deontay Johnson types who are probably going to be fine, from a season long perspective, but are not going to have an overly high ceiling on a week to week basis because they don't play for very good teams.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. Jordan Addison would have been my pick as well, but kind of leaning on that, going with a young upside piece on what I expect to be a very good offense. I will take my shot on JSN here. Again, full PPR type of format, 7th round JSN. Again, I always want to bet on young ascending players come the 7th round. This is a guy that is going to find his way probably to round 5 area, an underdog soon enough. So getting access to JSN at that spot, again, I prefer Addison straight up, but really, really like the valuation there of JSN, especially not to mention I got Calvin Ridley. I got Mike Williams in particular. Jerry Jeudy a little bit more boom bust, but I have a couple, steady wide receivers, quote unquote, in a 2 wide receiver, 2 flex format that I like building in the upside there with Jeudy and JSN to complement, of course, the 2 horses I have at running back as well. So I'm back on the clock here. We do see a couple tight ends off the board. We do see Dak Prescott go off the board. Now I'm kind of at a decision point where the only quarterback needy team between me and my next pick is at team 4. So if I'm looking at the quarterback position, I could just wait and hope Deshaun Watson does fall back. And then worst case scenario, if you think I should take him?
I would. Yeah. I think he's ranked in the 6th round for me, and this is round 8. I probably wouldn't risk it.
Yeah, that's smart. And then just catch up at the wide receiver position, because it's more than likely that team 4 would. Yeah, that was a good call.
Well, and like we said during the strategy portion of this video, your goal is still to have 6 wide receivers before round 10. If you double tap wide receiver round 9 and 10, you're going to have 6 wide receivers before round 10.
Yep.
And you probably are going to like your team a lot more, at least in my opinion, getting a quarterback who has legitimate upside as like the quarterback 7 in my rankings versus taking a wide receiver 3 type to fill out your depth, essentially, because you can't even get them into your roster when it comes to like, you already have Calvin Ridley, Jeudy, Mike Williams, JSN. And yeah, you want to count for bye weeks and, busts and that kind of thing. But I think Watson represents a higher like value over replacement type of option for me. So I'm on the board again. I'm definitely going to go with another wide receiver, I think, because Chase, DJ Moore, Christian Kirk, and Addison, there's some volatility there with DJ Moore and Addison particularly. So I'm probably going to grab another guy. I could go with a safe option here and make sure that I have that locked down in Brandon Cooks, who I think is a pretty clean projection, a good offense guy that should have a starting role right away and should work into my lineup right away. But instead, I'm just going to go for the nuts. I'm going to take Quentin Johnston here.
Smart.
Take 2 wide receivers, Jordan Addison and QJ there. Also, very interested to see because I wanted Gabe Davis to come back to me, and he does. So I'm going complete upside on the wide receiver position. I wanted to be 6 deep at wide receiver through all these rounds. I don't really love the tight end board right now. I think I can get somebody later like a Dalton Kincaid or a Greg Dulcich or somebody like that coming back to me. So I'm going to punt the tight end position, even though it might be a little bit sketchy. But like you kind of talked about, when you go double hero RB, I'm way more inclined to like punt one of quarterback or tight end. And especially knowing I got Justin Fields, who I think can be a horse for me at quarterback, I don't mind drafting, a punt tight end and maybe potentially streaming the position, because none of the values, maybe sans TJ Hawkinson, really lined up for me at my pick at that position. So I am going to grab Gabe Davis here. We're going to go straight volatility. My final flex spot's just going to be matchup based, probably between Jordan Addison, QJ, and Gabriel Davis. And I have some upside and some flexibility in case somebody doesn't work out or I deal with injuries or, bye weeks and that kind of thing. You definitely want to be, making it up in numbers. When you're not as strong at the wide receiver position, drafting 6 guys for 4 spots basically in your starting roster definitely helps you out in that case, because Chase obviously is going to be a stable lockdown stud for me, but outside of him, there's some question marks.
Yeah, 100%. And that was actually the decision point I had at 8-6. And the decision was made easier by me already having Mike Williams. But Quentin Johnson was a guy that stuck out like a sore thumb in that range. Everything I basically mentioned with JSN, good offense, young ascending wide receiver, is basically the same bet when I'm going to be making there with Quentin Johnson. Obviously, they're falling due to quote unquote crowded wide receiver rooms, but if they're the talents that I think they will be, that will be no problem with them, especially in what I expect to be higher passing volume type of offenses as a whole. So that was a really good pick, as well as the Gabe Davis pick, getting a little bit of upside for that flex position. For me, I obviously took Deshaun Watson, a guy that I think could be an elite quarterback this year. Obviously, this is a more, best ball type of theory, but if I'm already making the bet that Deshaun Watson's going to return to elite play, I may as well surround him with some of his weapons. And a guy in Elijah Moore, I have full faith in, especially in this 9th round valuation area, to be, a locked in every week top 25 wide receiver, possibly even higher if he meets the talent ceiling that I do expect him to. So for me personally, getting a guy like Elijah Moore at the 9-7, I'm all for it.
All right, so we have completed our drafts. You guys can see we built out, our double hero RB. We followed all of our rules that we talked about throughout the video. I grabbed Jamar Chase with my first pick, grabbed my 2 anchors, Breece Hall and Ramondre Stevenson. By taking those 2 players, I bypass the running back dead zone. I catch up at wide receiver with DJ Moore, Christian Kirk, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson, Gabriel Davis, Rashad Bateman, giving myself plenty of outs, plenty of upside to fill out those 2 wide receiver and 2 flex spots on any given week. Justin Fields is going to anchor my quarterback position. Ergo, I did not draft another one, which is something that newer fantasy players will make the mistake of doing. If you spend up at quarterback, there's no need to draft another one, because if that guy misses, you're probably not going to win your league anyway, and you're better off kind of just streaming the quarterback position. And then at the tight end position, I got a good value on Greg Dulcich. And then at the end of my draft, you can't see Kendre Miller's name, but I grabbed Roschon Johnson and Kendre Miller. A lot of people might look at my team and be like, how could you only draft 4 running backs total in 13 rounds? But the reason I did that is by taking 2 running backs early, you're assuming that those guys are going to hit. You're assuming that those guys are going to at least be RB1s, if not elite upside running backs like I think they can be with Breece Hall and Ramondre Stevenson. If either of those guys or both of those guys miss, again, I'm probably not going to win my league anyway. So it doesn't really suit me to double condiment and draft 3 running backs in the middle of the dead zone in case my running backs miss. It makes more sense to build out the rest of your roster, assuming those running backs are hits, and then, build out the rest of your team, and then just take dart throws at running back in the late rounds that you can maybe work into your flexes if they hit. Or worst case, if Breece Hall goes down for 5 games, I can maybe use Roschon Johnson or Kendre Miller in that case.
Similar type of theme for me as well. Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard as my double heroes in the 1st and 2nd round. Obviously, of course, you had a modified version where you got Chase first and got your 2 heroes in the 2nd and 3rd. So relatively similar there. I do end up anchoring my wide receiver 1 with Calvin Ridley, a guy that we both heavily believe in. Could potentially be this year's Stephon Diggs, entering that fold with an elite quarterback there in Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. So absolutely love that value at 3-7. End up making sure by principle 6 wide receivers through 10 rounds. And if you guys do the math here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through the 10th round. So I'm all caught up there at wide receiver, mixing in, of course, an elite upside piece at tight end with George Kittle, a guy that can score, 10, 11 touchdowns this year like he did last year on what should be a very good offense there in San Francisco, as well as Deshaun Watson. We've seen this guy perform as a top 5 quarterback in the past, has his weapons there in Cleveland. On top of that, making the bet on Deshaun Watson, I do end up making the bet there with Elijah Moore, like I referenced in the mock draft. So overall, I think we did a very good job backfill the running back position here. Elijah Mitchell, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, all upside handcuff type of archetypes where I don't need them to hit because I have Bijan Robinson, Tony Pollard. But if they do potentially give you, RB2, RB1 type of utilization at any point in the year, my team could be an absolute monster. So we built that the same way, avoided the running back dead zone, got our anchors up top, and backfilled with some, lottery ticket handcuff guys that can fill out our cores.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys enjoyed this video, if you got some value from it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments down below. Just tell us you enjoyed the video, ask us a question, whatever it is, we will respond and engage with you down there. Really appreciate the comments this time of year. If you guys want access to our redraft rankings, you can get our redraft rankings manifesto 2.0, our draft guide essentially for free by signing up and depositing just $10 on Underdog Fantasy right now, which you can then win money with. And obviously you'll get our draft guide as a free gift and our weekly rankings throughout the season to help you out with your start sit decision. So if that interests you, that will be linked down below in the pinned comment. If you already have an Underdog account or if you're in an eligible state or province like we are here in Ontario, you can go to flockfantasy.com and use the promo code FSE over there to get access to our season-long rankings, our draft guide, all the stuff that's of value there. Tiers, the Truth Series, FSE rankings versus your home league sites. So if you're drafting on ESPN, you can see who we're higher on than ESPN ADP, all that stuff chock full of value. Definitely check that stuff out in the links down below in the description. But with that being said, peace out and we'll talk to you soon.